right, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure you all get your questions answered as well. So I am going to get started. As I just said, once you join us, please stay muted. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box. This office hour session is also being recorded. We do have members from the Public Consulting Group, the Grant Administrator, as well as CDA's California Department of Aging here to answer your questions. For those of you that were on the last office hour session, the layout and format will be pretty much the same. So I'll briefly take the first 10 minutes to just review where we're at, what your next steps are. We will open the floor to questions, and I do have some examples kind of ready to go to hopefully help guide your submission of these forms. So we do want to remind you all that this office hour session will focus on technical assistance to navigate the next steps of the grant agreement and revision process. So for all questions regarding funding decisions, impermissible requests, etc., we will have the materials from November 9th webinar posted and made available shortly on our website. So we would like to direct you to those resources for more technical questions specific to your application. So again, November 13th, this will be our technical assistance office hours for the Bridge to Recovery for Adult Day Services grant program. So first, kicking off with their application update and revision process. If your application needs to be revised, whether it was missing information, an adjusted award amount for partial awards, etc., these forms are all visible on your Grants Connect profile. So again, Grants Connect is the application platform that we will use throughout the duration of the grant program. That is the same platform that you all submitted your application on. So there are 3 forms that are now visible to all of you: the award form, the grant agreement project description and budget form, as well as the banking form. We will go into a little bit more detail about these on the next slide. You all should have received an email on November 3rd, and any email from our Grants Connect system comes from this funky email address that is pcgcalifornia-aging, no reply at yourcause.com. These notifications were sent to the same email address that received your award letter. If you are off mute right now, I please ask you to go on mute. There's a little bit of feedback that I'm hearing, so I would appreciate that. So yes, so this email address on screen. I also want to note that some of your IT platforms might bounce emails from this address to your junk or spam folder. So we encourage you all to check those folders, and if necessary, please advise your internal IT systems that you will be receiving notifications from this email address. So if there is a way to unblock these sorts of notifications, that would be greatly appreciated and also beneficial to you all going forward. So again, 3 emails were sent directly from our Grants Connect system to notify you all that the below forms were added to your profiles. So step 1, and we do advise that you complete these forms in this order. So first and foremost, review the approved award amount, project description, and budget details on the award form. What the award form will tell you is your award amount, as well as an itemized breakdown of what specific budget line items or activities you were funded for. There were also some instances where applicants submitted requests for certain budget line items in the incorrect budget category. So we have gone ahead and corrected that for you within the award form. So for example, let's say you submitted your CADS 2024 registration lumped into your travel costs. The registration associated with the CADS conference is meant to be placed in the other category of the budget. So those are sort of details that we've parsed out for all of you within that award form. So that form is really your guide to, okay, here's what I was funded for, here's the correct budget category that it should go in, and so on and so forth. If you do have any questions about your award form, how to read it, the information in it, please feel free to reach out to us. We will post again our technical assistance, both phone, telephone number, as well as email address at the end of this presentation. So why is that award form helpful? That award form will be your best friend when you are completing and submitting the grant agreement, project description, and budget form. You will notice that this form mirrors your application. However, we have added some specific instructions to help make sure that we get all of the required information that we need from you all in order to proceed to the next steps. So for example, if you submitted a salaries and wages request, we need details as to your methodology for calculating the specific rate of that salaries and wages request. So again, we've added instructions on each tab of that grant agreement, project description, and budget form to help kind of guide you through not only submitting the form correctly, but also making sure that you are supplying all of the required information. Once you have submitted that grant agreement, project description, and budget form, PCG will review that form, make sure that both all of the information aligns with what was funded, as well as that we have all of the information that we need from you to then proceed to the next steps of the process. So if you're wondering, why is this form so important? Why is it necessary to have all of this detail? We will take pieces from that grant agreement, project description, and budget form and plug it right into your grant agreement. So we want to make sure that not only is the information correct, but that it's detailed, it has the information that you all need so that we can populate your grant agreement and get that process started. So the third and final step is completion and submission of your PCG banking form. This form does not necessarily have to be submitted at the same time or in order for us to proceed with your grant agreement. However, it's recommended that once you're in the system, you complete all the pieces at the same time. This is where you will submit your banking information. So upon invoicing and time to submit your request for reimbursement, we know exactly where to send that money. So we cannot release or disperse any funds to all of you until your PCG banking form has been completed. And again, there's a reminder at the bottom that your forms must be submitted before we can send you that grant agreement package for execution. So as we've started to receive some of these grant agreement, project description, and budget forms, we just wanted to kind of include some tips and tricks. So again, we have made your application available to all of you on your Grants Connect profile. So I really encourage all of you to open up that application. If you have the luxury of multiple screens, pop that up on another screen for reference. Because there are certain phrases and sentences from the original application that may be repurposed in your grant agreement, project description, and budget form. The point to emphasize here is that is only the case if these lines, phrases, etc., align with your awarded items. So if you are kind of going the copy and pasting route, which we'll get to later, so let's say you wrote out your project description on your application. You want to copy and paste the pieces of that written project description narrative that apply to your award. By all means, we encourage you all to do so. However, we do want to make sure that you are checking to only include the details that are relevant to your approved items. Please do not reference items or budget amounts that were removed. Again, PCG staff will be reviewing these submissions. If you do reference items that were not approved, we're going to send that form back to you and request certain revisions, which again delays your grant agreement. So we really encourage you all to do your due diligence so that this is a one-time submission. We don't have to come back to you for additional details or revisions, and we can get this whole grant agreement process rolling. So again, just some general guidance. As we have been reviewing some of these forms, these are just some common areas where we've had to send requests for revisions. So we thought it might be helpful to share some of these with all of you. First and foremost, we do want to note that the submitted budget information must match the approved project and budget details on the award form. So again, on that award form where we list what you are funded for and the specific amounts, please make sure that the budget that you submit in this grant agreement form matches that award form. We do understand that there may be instances where for the application, you might have used, back of the napkin type of calculations. And at this stage of the game, you're really doing those exact calculations. So we do understand if amounts are slightly below what was awarded on the award form. However, please note that what you submit on your grant agreement project description and budget form, that budget cannot exceed what is approved on your award form. So again, that is really important. We understand dollar amounts might be slightly below when you do those exact calculations, but those amounts cannot exceed what you were awarded on your award form. Some key areas to pay attention to. I know a lot of you were awarded for different salaries and wages requests, so please pay attention to the instructions provided. We do ask that you provide your methodology for calculating the salary request in the employee objective section. If you have your form pulled up, those directions will make a lot more sense. So again, pay attention to the instructions that we've provided about how to provide those methodologies for calculating rates. In addition, if you submitted a request for wage differentials, we will require the employee's old wage and new wage. As a reminder, you will only be funded for the difference between that old wage and new wage throughout the duration of the grant period or the duration that you requested. But for documentation purposes, we will require, currently they're at $40 an hour. I'm increasing them to $41 an hour. The difference is that $1 over 1 year of FTE employment. So we do need those types of details at this stage. In addition, if you submitted any requests for bonuses, whether that was a retention bonus or a new hire bonus, we do ask that you provide staff titles. You can provide these staff titles as an attachment, or you can provide them within the form itself. But again, all of these titles are required. If it is someone that you intend to hire, please submit the staff title that you intend to hire them for. We understand that you're looking at new hire bonuses, but please indicate if that new hire bonus is for a nurse or a driver or who you intend to give that new hire bonus to. As I previously mentioned, you may elect to either provide staff titles or other extensive requests on the application form itself. If you find the application form to not quite capture the information in the format that you wish to submit it in, we will allow an attachment to be submitted on the budget summary page. If you choose to go this route, please make sure to mention the attachment in the item description or justification. So if you have, several staff titles that you want to submit, go ahead and specify that you are providing 25 bonuses at $1,000 each for $25,000. That can go right on the budget form. And then in the attachments, if you'd like to provide a list of those staff titles, that is acceptable as well. Okay, so before we get into some revision examples, I do want to put this resource screen on the page. So here you have, there will be a link to our program webpage, our telephone number, as well as email address where you can write or call in for any questions or help with technical assistance. We do also want to draw your attention to the last point on the slide. We have added a third and final office hour session on Thursday from 10 to 11 a.m. We heard from many of you who probably will not be on this call, but maybe listening to the recording that due to the CADS conference and other things that were pulling your attendance at this time, that an additional office hours date would be greatly appreciated. So Thursday, November 16th, 10 to 11, you may join us as well. I will now open the floor to questions. So I will leave this screen up. Lisa, I will ask that you help moderate some questions within the chat. And if there are requests to view, I'm submitting my supplies section, what should that look like? We do have examples as well. So Lisa, I will pass it to you to help navigate this portion of the presentation.
So we have a question in the chat that I feel would probably good for everyone to hear. So the question is around Grants Connect, and if the narrative from the proposal, meaning the application, is that automatically transferred to the grant agreement?
Sure. So good question. The narrative that you provide for us under the project description on that first tab of the grant agreement form, again, our PCG staff will review it, make sure it looks good, make sure it mentions all the pieces, send it back to you if it doesn't. But that narrative in its final approved state will appear on your grant agreement. So yes, the exact language that you use and that gets approved on that form, you will then recognize on your grant agreement.
And to add to that, it will likely need to be revised. Meaning it will not be original from your application.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the purpose here and why we didn't, copy that original narrative from your application is that a majority of you receive partial funding, meaning that some portion of your application narrative no longer applies to your awarded narrative. So we would just appreciate if you all could reread the narrative that you provided, take out the details that were not funded, and kind of resubmit that narrative for us to review.
Great. And similar for the banking form within Grants Connect, can the person who signs the W-9 be different from the person who signs and submits the, I assume by e-form, that means the banking form on Grants Connect?
Sure. So we, for the purposes of this grant, there will be a designee for signature, and on that banking form, I'm sure you'll have noticed that there could be more than one person listed that's authorized to sign and submit your banking form and your grant agreement. So we do ask that you identify those people on the banking form for the purposes of this grant program. The individual who signs that W-9 can be different. Let's say your accountant deals with your W-9, whereas your program director is in charge of kind of reporting for this grant program. We understand that situations like that may happen. We just ask that if it is your program director who is signing the banking form, that is also the same designee on the grant agreement as well. So we ask that you are consistent, but recognize that the person who is that authorized signer for bridge to recovery purposes may not be the same person who signed your W-9.
Karen, and I just wanted to make a comment. This is Roxanne McAlpine from Department of Aging. Please double and triple check that banking information, because that is how PCG will be reimbursing your invoices. And if it is even one number off and that reimbursement gets deposited into an incorrect bank account of no fault of theirs, they will do every effort they can to get that money back. But if it is unrecoverable and the bank won't return it, there's nothing we can do if you provided incorrect information on that banking form. So please make sure your banking information is correct.
Yes, agree, Roxanne. And I think that also brings up a great point. So for the banking form, once you hit submit, it is locked, meaning that you cannot edit it. If you do notice that information on the banking form, whether it was incorrect or it needs to change, your banking information changes in 6 months, something like that, please do reach out to our technical assistance inbox. We can open up that form back to you to allow you to edit that information. But due to kind of the high level of security around that banking information, once you hit submit, it is locked. So again, should you need to edit it, please reach out to us to do so.
That brings up another good point. If your authorized representatives change for any reason, maybe they retired or they left your employment, please make sure you are updating the authorized form so PCG knows exactly who are your authorized representatives should anything change.
Great. And this is Lisa again. I also want to add that within the Grants Connect system, you can add authorized users so people can view can view all the components. So we can do that for you as well, or tell you how to do it.
Yeah, we could take this time now to tell you all how to do it. So on your main login screen, I believe it's at the bottom right hand corner, and you'll see a little sign that says Manage Applicants, and it looks like it has a little person with a plus mark to the left of that Manage Applicants button. So you can go ahead and click that button. And then type in the email address of any individuals that you want to add to your Grants Connect profile. You can also control their security settings. So you can check a box if you want them to receive notifications from Grants Connect. You could check a box if you want them to be able to edit your forms versus just view your forms. So these are all ways that if you need additional folks from your organization to help you complete these forms, you can go ahead and add them to your profile. This is also a great tool. Let's say you forget your password, you get locked out, the password assistance, isn't working for whatever reason. We can add either an alternate email for you or add another email from anyone else in your organization, with your permission to access that information. So you all have that ability to add on your side. As administrators, we also have the ability to add people as well. So should you request for additional email addresses on your account, that's something we're also happy to do as well.
That's a great tip and great function of the system. And just to state this out loud as well, we had a question in the chat if this office hour is being recorded due to the CADS conference. So we posted, as Roxanne responded in the chat, on the Bridge to Recovery website. And we have another question. In order to provide staff titles for the retention recruitment bonuses, does this mean that awardees need to enter each bonus as a separate line item?
So a little bit of a tricky question in that first step, is it a retention bonus? Is it a new hire bonus? So in the RFA, as well as updated guidance documents, we ask that you do separate the two. So step one, retention bonuses should go together. New hire or sign-on bonuses should be lumped together. We do ask that you parse those out for both reporting and data tracking purposes. The second piece to that is any staff member that is receiving the same dollar amount of bonus can go on the same line item. So let's say you have, 5 individuals that are receiving $1,000 retention bonus and 10 individuals that are receiving a $500 retention bonus. You would just separate out those receiving the $1,000 from those receiving the $500. So those are kind of the different ways that we want to see those parsed out. And again, if you are confused when completing the form or have any questions, those are things that you can submit attachments for. So again, if you think that there's a different way to show that information that makes more sense to you all, we ask that you make your best effort to complete the forms that we have provided, but we'll also welcome and consider any attachments to clarify your asks or how you completed that specific budget section.
Thanks, Karen. And to clarify that, so if there are 10 direct care staff and a program director and they're all receiving the same say it's a retention bonus, can you put those all on one line, or do they need to be separated by title?
Yes. So technically you can do it either way. I think it's a little more, less time consuming for you all to put them on one line. So in that first column, what you would do is say, retention bonus, 10, direct support professionals, 1 program director. Then in the next one, it asks for, how many. So you would say that it's for 11 people, $1,000, $11,000 for that line item. I do believe I have that written out here. Yep. So here is an example. In this case, these are all retention bonuses, but what you can see is here's your program director. They're getting their $1,000 retention bonus, whereas these 10 individuals, 2 RNs, 3 social workers, and 5 drivers are getting $750 each. So this is an example of how you can throw them all on the same line, different staff titles, but they are at the same rate. So hopefully that kind of helps clarify.
And Karen, I just wanted to point out, you must list the staff title. So you wouldn't say, 10 direct support workers. You need to list the individual titles, like 3 RNs, like her example, 4 social workers, 5 drivers. So we can make sure the title is eligible.
Yes, thank you, Roxanne. That's important clarification. The next request is an awardee would like to know specifically where to find the current narrative that they need to update. I assume in the Grants Connect system, and how to find that narrative that needs updated.
Yes. So I will leave this slide for reference in 1 second. On your application, there was, I believe it was on the project description tab that asked you for your project description narrative. That application should be visible to all of you in Grants Connect. So again, if you have the luxury of multiple screens, go ahead and throw that application up on one screen, bring up your grant agreement, project description, and budget form on another. That way you can kind of seamlessly copy and paste the information that applies from one to the next. So what I have on the screen, and those of you that were on last week's office hours, this may look familiar. On the left is an example of a project description that was submitted with the application. The items highlighted in red are those that were ineligible items that were not funded, so they would not have been listed on that award form. So what I've done is basically copy and pasted, my project description from the application, removed the items in red that were not funding or that not funded, or those that were ineligible for funding. And that's how I generated my revised project description. Took, probably about 2 minutes to read through, highlight what was not funded, delete it, and then submit my new project description. So when we talk about copying and pasting and repurposing viable pieces of your application, this is a good example of what we mean.
Great. And to clarify, when we talk about forms, you'll see within the Grants Connect system, there's the grant agreement, project description, and budget form. That's typically what we're referencing here. Your award form is not editable, but the grant agreement, project description, and budget form is editable. So hopefully that will help clarify a question in the chat. And we also had a couple questions about direct support positions and any specific clarifications we might have on how those positions fit into this grant.
Sure. So following our webinar on the 9th, where we kind of discussed ineligible or impermissible items or projects, as well as permissible projects, there were kind of lots of comments that came through. We are actively well, first of all, we thank you for your feedback and those comments. We do take them all into consideration, and CDA is actively reviewing those staff titles, and keeping, those comments are now taken into consideration. So if and when we have any updates, we will contact you directly should your award, get revised at all. So Roxanne, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted everyone to know that we heard you guys loud and clear. We went by one set of regulations, and stakeholders brought to our attention several other regulations that we are now looking into. So we want to give everybody an opportunity and not overlook anything. So someone posted a comment about the LVN. So we are looking into regulations for that, and we should be making a decision this week on other direct staff. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's under review, and there's a good chance we will be allowing some of these other positions, but we just have to research all the regulations.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Uh-huh.
And to clarify for the next question, so to repeat, for wage differentials, can line items be combined by employee title? And the answer, which we have said, is yes. So that should help clarify that.
Right.
And
And yeah,
then,
Lisa, I'll just point out the slide that's on the screen. So again, kind of same rules apply as a bonus. So if individuals are at the same rate, you can list them together. So again, we have that up here. Employees at the same rate can be listed together regardless of whether they are the same title. So I recognize that this example, they're both RNs, but if this was, one RN, one social worker, they were receiving the same wage differential payout, those can be included on the same line. Again, we want to make this as user-friendly and intuitive to all of you. So if it helps you to separate those out, separate them out. If you're looking to save lines and maybe save a little bit of time, those at the same rate can be submitted on the same line.
great. And next question is around bids. So the awardee is asking to clarify how many bids must be submitted per project item, and when must they be submitted?
Sure. So if you review the RFA, there were, I believe, the original RFA and two addendums to the RFA. You'll notice that there is at least a minimum of 2 bids required for contractual work. Those, one bid was required at the time of application. So if you did not submit a bid with your application, either a bid or a cost estimate, then we did not consider that project or that item eligible for funding. During the reporting process, we will collect that second bid. And again, I do want to reiterate, it's in the RFA. That is a requirement to be in compliance with this grant program. We do recognize that, it's if you're fixing your patio, it might be hard to get an estimate to extend your patio after it's already extended. So you might want to think about these requirements within the context of the work that you are doing, and kind of plan accordingly as to when you seek out these additional bids. But again, to summarize, a minimum of 2 cost estimates or bids is required for this grant program. And we also want to reiterate that you do not necessarily have to take the one, the bid that is lower in cost, right? So let's say you have a pre-existing relationship with the contractor, you're aware of their quality of work, for whatever reason the case may be, you will be able to justify which bid you selected through our reporting process. So again, you do not have to select the lower cost bid, but you will have to justify as to why you selected one bid over another. Good question, though. Appreciate that one.
Great. And another question from the chat. So if an applicant or an awardee sees something that's been relocated to a different section within their grant application, such as retention bonuses. They're wondering how they label this amount under other. So do they need to list staff titles? That answer is
Sure.
yes, but you can go into more of it.
Yeah, so we noticed that some of you submitted all of your wage requests under salaries and wages, whereas bonuses, whether that was a new hire or retention bonus, for example, fall onto that other category. So what you will need to do is parse out those costs in the correct budget category. If there are instances, for example, where our reviewers had to make assumptions about your requests, whether it was, a lack of detail or you provided some sort of attachment to help kind of clarify those costs. If our review team made any incorrect assumptions, about your budget requests, we encourage you to write into us so that we can help you fix and navigate these forms together. But yes, bonuses should go under other. Any requests for wage differentials or temporary staff salaries, those are meant for the salaries and wages category.
And that is actually all the questions that we have from the chat that we have not addressed otherwise.
Sure. Okay, so I think it might be helpful to go through some of these. So for example, looking at contractual costs, a key piece where we were pretty specific in what we were looking for when it came to a sanitation company, for example. This is an example of the level of detail that we were looking for. And again, this may be useful to you all now submitting your revised forms, or perhaps in future rounds if this is a cost that you're interested in submitting a request for. So any request related to a sanitation company, if you're looking to, wax the floors or things like that, those are not sanitation activities that this grant program will fund. What it will fund is a deep clean of your facility, whether that's sanitizing counters or doorknobs or things of that nature. So we do ask that you are specific and detailed in your requests, as well as how those requests align to the goals of the Bridge to Recovery grant. So sanitation companies and requests for sanitation services were kind of a key area, where individuals may not have been funded. And that was perhaps because, the activities that request was covering was kind of too broad of an umbrella as to what this specific grant project is looking to fund. So again, when you're making decisions about, grant requests, whether that's for this round or future rounds, think about having those goals of the grant program in the back of your mind, and in your budget descriptions, really connecting those activities and those items to the goals of the grant. The RFA is still posted. It will be posted throughout the duration of the grant program. So that is a great reference point for all of you to kind of take a check back at, what are the goals of the grant? What are they looking to fund? Things like that. So that was kind of a key area to highlight. I also wanted to highlight specific to contractual bids. We saw kind of a spectrum of bids. So there were some bids where costs were itemized down to the hour of the labor to install the HVAC. Some of them included the cost of the equipment within that bid. Some identified, that the cost for the piece of equipment was coming from a different place. So these are all details and the level of itemization that we need at this stage in the game. So on the screen, you'll see the first example of a contractual section where the cost to acquire the piece of equipment is included in the bid. We have included those details in the budget breakdown, as well as the description of activities. On the lower half of the screen, that example kind of details a situation where the HVAC or the equipment portion is not included in the bid. And again, that is identified as well in that budget breakdown or description of activities. So the less room you leave for our review team to guess what you're asking for or what you're funding, the better. We don't want to run into situations where you go to submit your invoice, and you have some impermissible activities within that invoice. So again, start to think through those details now, start to think through what activities and items the Bridge to Recovery Grant Program is really looking to fund, and then think, am I being clear and am I providing those details through these forms? That will help us as well as help you all as well. Lisa, I see there's some questions coming through. Any that you want to highlight?
Yes. So one question I think will be good to go over is if an employee has left since the application was submitted, can a different employee with the same title and the same rate replace them? And how should this be reflected in the budget?
Yes. So admittedly, we are more concerned with staff titles than staff name. So if you need to swap out that staff name, that is acceptable. Again, the key here is that it's the same staff title and the same rate. So in that instance, yes, that swap is acceptable. If you are looking to swap, let's say, that wage differential to another staff member, that cannot be done at this time. A little bit later on in a couple of weeks, we will have a webinar that's focused on invoicing and reporting, and we will also detail how to use the change request form. So the change request form will be reserved for instances where you are moving funds from one budget line item to another. So again, to summarize, if it's the same staff title, same rate, different name, sure, we can swap that out easily here. If it is a different staff title or a different rate, those changes require a change request form, which we will explain a little bit later in the process.
Great. Okay. And just to clarify for those who are joining us late today, yes, we completely understand there's a lot going on, and this presentation is being recorded and will be posted. So we have a clarification on the CADS conference. So if awardees requested a 2023 CADS conference costs, does that mean that programs awardees will need to submit a change request form if they requested for 2023 instead of 2024 funding?
Sure. So that's a great question. What our review team should have done. So this should appear on your award form, but in the instance that it does not, please feel free to call or email us. If you requested for the 2023 CADS conference, but did not request for other years, on the award form, it should indicate 2024 CADS conference. So in that instance, nope, change request form not required, because on the award form, we've told you the year that you were funded for. So again, if that level of detail is not on your award form, please let us know so that we can update and correct. But transferring funds from one year of the CADS conference attendance to another, that does not require a change request form, because those were all decisions that were made during the awarding process.
Okay, great. Also to clarify what I said earlier about the presentation, we posted to the Bridge to Recovery website.
Yes. And
okay.
On the topic of the CADS conference, travel is an area that we're really looking again for you to kind of parse out and itemize those details. So separate your lodging request from your mileage, from your airfare. A lot of you kind of gave us lump sums where you had one line item to include all of these things. Again, that leads to a lot of assumptions on the reviewer part, in that we might not know exactly what dollars are going towards what. So again, please parse out these costs, there are some examples on the screen of how to do so. We understand that for things like airfare, you might not book your ticket for 2024 yet. So, if you want to do some brief research, here's an estimate of what flights usually cost and use that number. That is perfectly acceptable at this time. But again, we do ask that you break out these costs, and specific to lodging, please look at the travel reimbursements on the California Department of Human Resources website. You will not be reimbursed for rates above those mentioned on the website. So again, great reference tool for you all when kind of thinking about parsing out and planning some of these costs.
And we have a question around bid clarification. So when bids are due, how many bids are due? I think we may have discussed this earlier, but it's a question from the chat.
Sure. Yeah. So again, to reiterate, one bid was due with your application. If you did not submit a bid, or at the very least, a pretty detailed cost estimate, we did not approve that budget item. So for most of you, that means we are just waiting on a second bid to be submitted through our reporting process. Also want to encourage you all to think about the context of your project. The example we talked about earlier might be hard to get a bid on extending your patio after the patio has already been extended. So you might want to think about it within your work plan and how you plan to proceed with your grant activities to make sure to build in time to get that second bid, which will be collected during our reporting process. So again, two bids, you will have to justify why you selected one bid over another. That selection does not have to be this bid was cheaper, so that's why I took it. We understand that there are other factors like relationship with contractors or quality of work or reputation, that might play a role in these decisions. So two bids, select one. We will ask for your justification through our reporting process. That will come a little bit later down the line.
And again, this is Roxanne. I just wanted to reiterate, we are going to have another webinar discussing the invoicing and reporting process. So you guys will get further clarification of what is required, when it needs to be submitted. Once all of the grants are executed, we will be hosting that webinar as well sometime in December. So stay tuned for that communication to come out with those dates.
Great. And in the meantime, again, the RFA that is still posted on our website and will continue to stay up on our website. There are specific sections about invoicing and reporting requirements and all of that good stuff. So I think it would, at this time, if you do have questions, reference that document, bring those questions to our webinar. But again, we should be covering, that phase of the grant in early December.
Yes, and if applicants or awardees will need to bid, so they can get started on that at this point. If your question in the chat was around that, and then we have a different question regarding project description. So in the project description, can due dates for activities be changed? And how will these due dates be applied in the reporting process?
Sure. So project description here, as well as your work plan, which when we say work plan, we mean your objectives and activities, and things like that. Those timelines and those dates, we understand that those are subject to change, and that there are certain unforeseen circumstances that affect those. So when completing your forms, first and foremost, your timeline, we understand that your work plan at this stage might be different than your work plan in your application. That is totally acceptable. That's fine. Things change. The second piece to that is, let's say you submit this form, you told us you were going to do something in March, you had a delay with a contractor that will push that work to June. Those are all things that via progress reports, you can provide those updates and edit your timeline. So we are not holding you firm to your timelines. The only firm date to keep in mind is March 31st, 2026. That is when your last invoice can be dated and submitted. So that is really the only kind of set in stone sort of date. Your other timelines, we understand that they are subject to change, and those can be updated and revised in the progress reports. And again, more details to come during that reporting webinar.
And a specific question from the chat regarding documentation for the bid. This awardee is just wants to make sure that they don't need to resubmit their bid that they've already submitted.
Sure. So if you are on your Grants Connect profile, there's just a general tab called attachments. Any attachment that you have submitted thus far or that you sent in for our review should be uploaded to that attachments tab. Those attachments will live there as long as this grant program is active. So you do not need to resubmit those bids unless we request them for some reason. But no, those should live on your attachments tab. If for some reason you believe you submitted something that's not on your attachments tab, that might be a reason to call or email us, but you will have that attachments tab available to all of you to reference, okay, I did submit my bid, or I didn't, submit this yet. So feel free to check and reference that attachments tab.
Karen, I just wanted to point out one reason why a bid may have to be resubmitted is, let's say you were getting an HVAC project and the total bid was 96,000, but it wasn't itemized out. So the cost would be acceptable and the items they listed, but we need to see it itemized out. So that could be one example of why you would need to resubmit the bid in order to have those items itemized.
Right. Yes. So appreciate that clarification. So any additional information will need to be attached, but the bids that you have previously submitted, those are still all live in our Grants Connect platform.
And we have about 5 minutes left. I don't have any more questions in the chat, but to just reiterate on the bids, if there are any previous bids for disallowed items, you don't, it's not necessary for awardees to delete those unnecessary bids.
Right. So again, these are the resources available to you. We will have another session on November 16th from 10 to 11 a.m. So hopefully, in the time between today and then, if you have a chance to take another look at your forms, have any additional questions that arise, feel free to join us.
On behalf of CDA, just want to thank everyone who attended, and PCG was gracious enough to add another session, so that will be on Thursday. And thank you all for attending.